So I'm Beth Billings from Around the Table Yarns, and we are talking about duplicate stitch today. And I'm going to demonstrate how to do it on a baby sweater. So I'm going to start the camera. Here is the baby sweater. And the first thing, like any work that you do with yarn and a darning needle, you don't want too long of a piece of yarn to work with, because as you pull it through the stitches, it will start to wear the yarn. And so we only pick a piece maybe 18 to 24 inches long. So it's not a hugely long piece of yarn. And the other thing about doing surface work on your knitting is that if you use a yarn that's heavier than what was used in the actual fabric, it will be maybe too heavy on the surface of your knitting. So this yarn is actually the same yarn as what was used in it, and you could use the same yarn or lighter, a lighter gauge for doing duplicate stitch. And duplicate stitch is exactly that. It's duplicating a stitch of knitting with embroidery thread or yarn. And you're going to work, typically what I was reading is that you work from right to left. And I think that that is if you're working and you're right-handed. I think if you're left-handed and you wanted to work from left to right, that would be just peachy. So I am right-handed. I am going to start from right to left. And it is best to work from the bottom right-hand side of your area and then work either horizontally or diagonally up. And then as you need to move back in the other direction, you can rotate the piece around. So I'll show you how to do that. So to make a duplicate stitch, first you need to actually identify a stitch. So I'm putting my needle under the stitch just to give you a little visual. And what I want you to see, I'm going to try and zoom in closer. What I want you to see is that the stitch has the appearance of being a V. So we're looking to duplicate that V. And to come from the bottom right-hand corner, I'm just going to bring my yarn in from the side, and I'm going to come out in the center, the bottom center of the V that I want to duplicate. So this is the V where my needle is. This is the V that I want to duplicate.
Wait, because I'm not seeing the. Okay.
Can you see the needle?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the yarn is coming out from the bottom of the stitch, and I'm just putting my needle under the two legs of the stitches that I'm going to duplicate. Okay. So to duplicate it, I'm going to follow this line and go under the stitch above. I pull fairly gently because I don't want to distort. I just want to cover the stitch underneath. And then I'm going to come in. I'm just going to unbutton my little sweater here. I'm going to come in into the same spot. And that's a duplicate stitch. So you can see I've made a little green stitch in the middle, and it covers up the stitch that was under it. It does thicken the fabric a little bit, but it's, if you're gentle with it and you pull just very gently, it is perfectly lovely. So if I were going to continue in a line, I would have brought my needle out in the center of the next stitch, right there, followed the top of the stitch around, and then, oops, pull gently, rethread my needle, and then go back in where you've come out of. And if you're going to continue horizontally, you continue moving the needle over to the left 2 legs. So this is the outside of the stitch that I'm coming back into, and this is the outside of the stitch next to it. So I move over one stitch. And again, you don't want to pull too tightly when you're doing this, but you're just mimicking the shape of the stitches going along. So you could do this and create a line of text. You could make letters, you could make figures. And there we go. So there's 3 in a row.
Mhm.
I'm going to do a 4th one, and then I'm going to move up diagonally. Like so. So instead of coming right out in the same line, I'm going to go over 1 stitch and up 1 row. Oop. Knocked my camera. So now I'm 1 row higher up, and I'm making the same duplicate stitch in that row. So that's how you can move. Now, if I wanted to turn around, what I might do is just anchor this and come out. Let's say I wanted to do my next stitch in the center here. So I just need to go in here and through there. So that anchors when you turn. And then you can rotate it so that you can continue going from right to left. And now you see I'm in the top of it here. Sorry, I'm in the wrong place. You want to come out here.
Wait a minute.
Oh.
Raise it up.
Sorry.
There we are.
There we are. That's not very focused. That's
Great.
better. Is that good?
Yeah, that's great.
Is it better like that, or do you want the light on?
This is better for me.
Okay. There's a little more contrast. Okay. So if you turn it around to work back in the other direction, you just need to find the beginning of your stitch. So here's the beginning of my stitch going in this direction. So I'm just working up very close to the needle there. Back over. So if I were filling in a space, you would continue working from left to right by reversing the fabric. And it depends on what you're making. If you're I once created a sweater where I duplicate stitch, I did intarsia and did a heart on the sweater, and then I duplicate stitch above it and made the word sweet. So it was a sweet heart. It was very cute. Okay, so now we're there, and maybe we want to come out again. Maybe we want to turn around and go back the other way. So I'm going to come there. I'm going to rotate my fabric again. So I'm just rotating at 180 degrees to turn. And then to do this anchoring, I'm just going right 1 row up. So I'm coming out of this stitch here, and I'm going to go 1 row up and then move over to the center of the next row. And when you pull that in, it's anchored in there, but it doesn't really show. And then you're set to go up to the next stitch. So you can see I could create a whole picture, and you can use a chart like an intarsia chart to do this. So you have to be aware if you want to create a picture, if you want to design your own thing, words or a picture to do on a finished piece of knitting, that you should use what's called knitter's graph paper, which is like this. It's rectangular. And I just printed this off of the internet and I looked under knitter's graph paper to find it. So if you wanted to trace or copy somebody's initials or do a heart or whatever, you don't want to draw it on square graph paper, because then when it comes out, it will look too short. So a geographic pattern might be fine on square graph paper, but for images that you want to look proportionate in their height to their width, you'll want to use rectangular graph paper. And I looked on the internet and found 3 different places that you can download knitter's graph paper and print it for free. So I'm going to put that in the notes with this recording. Okay.
Yeah.
So just to give you an idea of the different kinds of uses of embroidery on knitting or doing this, I just want to show you this book. So this is a book by Britt Marie Christopherson, whose other book I also love, even if I don't know that I've ever had the gumption to try it. So this was her first book that I got. It's called Pop Knitting, and she has the most amazing designs using all kinds of different techniques to make amazing fabrics and color work. So I've always been a big fan of hers, and recently I saw that she had a new book, and her new book is called Embroidery on Knitting. And it is equally inspiring. If you don't like to do color work, but you want something really colorful, this book shows you how to use the simplest tools to create on the surface of your knitting elaborate decoration. And you could even do it on something you didn't knit. You could do it on a sweater that you purchased to make really fun decorations. So I wanted to share this because it's not exactly duplicate stitch, but it's in the idea of duplicate stitch. And just to say that, you know, sometimes knitting is the actual canvas for what we're doing to be creative, and sometimes it is just the starting point. So that's just a little taste of what duplicate stitching could lead to if it got out of hand. So here's our little spot that we were doing, and you can see that it looks pretty much like the knitting itself. It is a little bit thicker. It feels a little bit like a patch on the knitting. And I did have another name for this is Swiss darning. And so there are people who darn their socks in advance of it wearing. So like if you know that the back of your heel is a place where you get a lot of wear on your socks, or the bottom of your heel or the point of your toe, you could do duplicate stitching in those areas to reinforce them ahead of any wear happening, or as wear is beginning to happen, you could do duplicate stitching. Another thing that I've seen people do with duplicate stitching is to create a little patch on an elbow of a sweater. So in the case of a friend of mine, she did little heart patches on the elbows of a sweater. And I think it was part of her design and what she wanted it to look like, but it also reinforced an area that can get worn. So duplicate stitching can be used to prevent or repair wear on a sweater, and it can be used to correct mistakes in color knitting. So whether it's intarsia or stranded color work, if you make a mistake, you can always cover it up with duplicate stitching. In cable knitting, I've read that you could correct mistakes in cabling with duplicate stitching. I've never tried it, but I feel like that's something totally doable. And it can also be used to add lettering or figures or a picture to the canvas of a piece of knitted garment. So it's a fun technique. It, you know, for somebody who's making a present for a relative or a loved one, they can put the initials or the name or the date inside of the brim of a hat or on top of a sock or, you know, in any place. So duplicate stitching is a nice tool to have in your knitting toolkit. And it's kind of soothing. I like doing it. I find it very, I don't do a lot of embroidery, but I find this to be a very soothing kind of an activity to do. Any questions? No? Okay. Well, I hope you have enjoyed it, and we will be back next week with a new topic. I'm not sure even what it is, but I can check.
Yeah, I have it right here.
You do? What are we? What am I teaching next? I think it's Pam, but is it interlock?
The yoga short simple chair.
Oh, we're gonna do yoga.
Yeah, on the 17th.
Oh, that's wonderful. You'll enjoy that.
And that's as much as I've gotten. I didn't print off anything else yet.
That's okay. Well, Rosalind, it was a pleasure, and it's nice to see your letter A.
I know. There we go.
There you are. You're fine.
Hi,
You don't have,
Anna.
you don't have to have your
Library. I was watching it in the car, so
Oh, good.
running around.
Well, we did record it. I'm going to have to edit it because there was a little bit of a pause in the middle, but I'll fix it and put it back up.